Hey, everybody, we got a brand new format for you today. It's called the Countdown to ÖTILLÖ. We're 5 months out from ÖTILLÖ, the Swimrun World Championship, so we're going to go give you a full in-depth look about what we're thinking about and how we're feeling, and got some really cool guests lined up for you to focus on a particular thing that we're focusing on this month. So, without further ado, let's jump into it, plus a new theme song. Welcome to the Low Tide Boys, a swim run podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 118 of the show. So what are we doing here? So we thought, when we started the show in 2020, our thought was to help grow the sport, but also share our journey. And in that spirit, we figured we might as well put it all out there now that we have a chance to race what's going to be one of the crazier events that we've ever done. And that's after a long list of ultras, double centuries, turkey trots,
all sorts of craziness,
Ironmans, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I think the way we're thinking about it is ÖTILLÖ is a quest, and we really feel privileged to get the opportunity to go do it. A race that we've been talking about and thinking about for a long time, seen a ton of videos, and yeah, we figured we'd put it all out there and take you along our journey, and we're 5 months out.
Yes, so one episode a month for the next 5 months is going to be dedicated to this format, and we'll sort of check in, and we're going to go through how are we feeling, things we found interesting, nutrition, gear, all sort of stuff, really particular and specific to us and our journey to ÖTILLÖ, the Swimrun World Championship in September.
Yeah, and this episode is made possible. We actually have supporters, which is amazing.
We need to thank them.
Yeah, we'd love to thank Odyssey Swimrun for supporting us really since the beginning. Frank Paddle,
absolutely,
best
Frank
carbon
Paddle.
fiber paddles in the world, and Precision Fuel and Hydration, which that'll make a lot of sense later. We have some really great guests on this show that we'll be introducing in a little bit, but. There's one thing that Chipper and I would do anytime there was a big workout or a race. I think it was usually me, but...
It was usually you, yeah.
Where I would just text them and be like, how's the body, the mind?
Mm-hmm.
So we figured for this, it's like, hey, we're 5 months out from this race.
It's a good check-in for us.
Yeah, how are you feeling about all this?
Yeah. So I know we sort of talked about this a little bit. We have our own how's the body, how's the mind sessions that were not not taped or not recorded, rather. But yeah, I think... Right now, I'm just feeling super pumped for it. Our training, we're now in our 4th month of kind of ramping since January, feeling like the body has picked up kind of where we left off after the recovery. I feel good, really excited for Swimrun Lake James coming up in April. Had a great time at the Catalina kind of swimrun camp, and I just got all the good swimrun juices flowing, physically. That's how I'm feeling. That's the body part. How's your body feeling?
Body feels good. Body feels good. I think that, I've noticed it in our training. I think we're both super motivated.
Yeah.
And putting in the work. And, one thing that we were talking about sort of offline is, our mission of the show is essentially try to help grow the sport, but then also chronicle our journey while trying to have as much fun as possible in the process. And I feel like the way where my mind is at now and where I want to kind of keep it is having this sort of dual track where we're preparing for this thing to be as best prepared as possible at that start line so that when we get there, we can have as much fun as possible. Because for us, if I can speak for you, Chipper, this is going to be like going to Disneyland. It's going to be like a 10 to 14 hour Disneyland
day at Disneyland,
where we're going to be able to retrace these steps and, like mentioned at the beginning, go on this quest that not that many people have gone on. The sport is still super young, but, we clearly love the sport, and it's such a great, it's just going to be so much fun.
Yeah, and I love the way that you put that, going to Disneyland. And when we were talking the other night, we're like, oh, we're preparing, our training, we're going to go to war.
Mm-hmm.
But we know the second that we get to Sweden, we're at Disneyland.
Yeah.
And we just want to be as prepped as we can. I think if we're able to maintain that mindset, and that includes what we talked about too, flexibility for, hey, we're not going to be able to make every workout for the next 9 months, and it being okay for you or me to go, hey, I need to sleep in, I'm feeling whatever, or the kids kept me up or whatever. We need to kind of keep that bit of it. But yeah, I totally agree. The mind is feeling very like dialed in, excited, engaged for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that we kind of talked about, we brought it up again, like with the cold water practices that we've been having in our last couple swim runs, is like this. What we're kind of saying is like going Goggins.
Yeah.
So David Goggins, if you don't know, our favorite journalist Adam Skolnick, helped pin Goggins.
Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah, Can't Hurt Me.
The sensation, worldwide sensation.
Check it out.
Now published in Spanish.
All sorts of languages there, but basically Goggins is just some like mental freak that he just says something in his mind, he's able to overcome his mental. So that's what he can overcome it mentally. So that's kind of what we're doing. Like, hey, the water's going to be cold. Let's Goggins this shit and let's just
do the work. Get
in there and do it.
The work.
And I think we got to kind of keep that in. I think that's sort of helping us a little bit. But
I think to that point though, I think where we're at now is I feel like we have a good balance. Where, for example, I went to a Warriors game on Wednesday, and Thursday we had a really hard swim. And I don't know how many, maybe 5 times I just looked over. I'm like, I'm dying, dude, I'm dying. But it's just like, I went in and just did the best I could. Same thing like a track Wednesday morning. Just like, I texted Chipper this, is like, oh man, I heard you huffing and puffing, and that just got me super motivated because I know you're putting in the work, and it just makes me want to work harder, and I know you're doing it for the team, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. But while at the same time, our pool got canceled. We're recording this on a Sunday, and Chipper found a pool like at 8, and I'm like, I can't go because I promised the kids I'm making challah French toast, which was bomb.
I know. I was like, is there going to be leftovers after
No,
the
it's
swim?
gone.
Damn.
Oh, hell no,
Okay.
it's gone. But it's finding that balance where it's like, hey, I want to be as prepared for this as possible, but I'm still prioritizing my family, still doing everything I need to do, and trying not to put this race on some sort of it's already on a pedestal because it's a world championship.
But don't let the pedestal get too high. Like a giant sequoia redwood here.
Exactly.
But yeah, that flexibility, and I know, hey, you're not making the swim. I know you're good for it, and same thing. It's gonna come back my way as well. And something that I also kind of like the mindset for these workouts is every swim and track workout we get, I'm like, this thing is a ball buster. Like it's a killer hour swim set, and the way I'm trying to approach be really intentional about these workouts is like, listen, we're getting up at fucking 5 a.m, majority of the week, and I'm gonna in the dark freeze my ass off, get up, be picked up early, go run, swim, and I'm not gonna give my best effort that I have in the pool. I'm gonna wake up and spend all that time and then like half-ass it on the workout. That's craziness. So I've like committed to myself, I'm putting, just like you did, maybe you were a little sluggish or whatever, who cares? You did the best that you could, because on race day, we might not feel perfect. We got to put the best that we can.
Yeah, and I feel like, like I was saying, mentally, I feel like as a team, we're in a really good place and really vibing. Our communication's really great. And I think, everything that we've done leading up to sort of this build is going to inform this experience that we're hoping is going to be super positive. And, goal number 1 is kind of staying on our feet. But earlier this week, Chipper, you sent me the Rich Roll race report for when they did it in 2017, which was the gnarly year.
Yeah.
If you don't know what we're talking about,
the nasty year.
We'll link the YouTube
Weather-wise.
video from Rasmus in the show notes, the hype movie for that one, because it was an epic day. And at first, I was like, oh, this will be super cool. Listen to it. And it was funny because I had a lot of mixed reactions because it was a hard day. And the way they describe it is very different than we usually hear the race being described.
Yeah.
Mostly like, basically it was, not to spoil it for anyone, but it was a ball buster for him. I felt like when I was first listening to it, I was like, damn, why'd Chipper suggest this? Like, it's kind of getting me out of the zone. But by the time I was done with it, it actually got me even more in the zone, because I was like, yeah, they had a really hard day. And you know what? That could be us too. And you have to be prepared
be ready for it.
To do that. And I think, the take home from that podcast, and people should listen to it. I think it's episode 333 or something.
313,
313, is that it's a long day. It's a long day. You could feel bad, you could feel great, and as long as you're committed to continue to move forward and doing the best you can, you will get to the other side.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And I remember listening to that race report, if you will, when it came out in 2017, and this would have been before we would have done any swim runs. And I remember thinking, wow, that seems pretty crazy. And that the accompanying New York Times article that Adam Skolnick wrote sort of had that up, like looking at the pictures and kind of reading along as I was listening. It was a cool kind of experience, and obviously there was videos and stuff of it as well. But yeah, it was really good. And to kind of hear also how Swimrun has grown since that has happened and everything is pretty neat. So 5 years later, we're doing it as well. But yeah, I mean, I think the day that they set out to go in terms of how fast they went or whatever, I think probably maybe would have missed the mark for them, I think. But they had a really great time. And if you hear them talking about the race, even though they didn't have the best day that they knew they could have, they had the best day ever.
Right, yeah, the greatest endurance experience that they've ever had.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I want that. I want that experience. I mean, I think we're obviously super stoked on Swimrun, and I think one of the things we want to do with this show is kind of just be transparent about sort of our mental state and as we're building up to this and sort of bring everyone along this journey. But we also thought it'd be helpful to be like, hey, there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. On everything. There's always room for improvement. So we thought, well, why don't we bring on guests that can help us sort of understand the course, understand what we need to do to prepare. So we have a couple awesome guests lined up.
Basically, we're trying to be like sponges. If you haven't noticed, we're trying to be like giant low-tide sponges soaking up anything that comes in surrounding ÖTILLÖ to, to be as prepared as possible, I guess. We're going...
Totally. So our first guest is Anna Lundberg, and she reached out to us pretty much right after we qualified and we were all on the, she DM'd us and she was like, oh my God, super stoked for you guys. And if you ever want a female perspective from someone who's not winning and you want to learn more about cutoffs and things like that, happy to talk to you. And we were just immediately like, yes,
do it.
We definitely want that perspective because it's true. We have interviewed a lot of people that are sort of on the pointy end, and it'd be great to hear sort of mid-pack, what's that experience like? So she was awesome enough to come on.
Yeah. So we're going to kick it over to our conversation that we had a few weeks ago with Anna, and then we'll bring it right back.
All right. We're super stoked to have Anna Lundberg come on the show. She has raced ÖTILLÖ twice. She reached out to us when we found out that we had gotten in and started posting on Instagram congratulating us. And basically, she gave us a really interesting idea, which was like, hey, we know you've gotten a lot of advice from the pros, from the pointy end, but how about some advice from people that are trying to fight the cutoffs, chasing cutoffs and things like that. And I was like, that's such an amazing idea. I asked her to come on, and here she is. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, we're super stoked as well. Again, thank you so much for congratulating us and welcoming us to come to Sweden and do the World Championship, and also for being willing to share your insight with us and to our listeners who might be racing for the first time or who knows. But I guess the first question is, how are you and how did you get into Swimrun?
So I'm actually still recovering from COVID. I caught COVID 5 weeks ago, so still trying to get into shape. But slowly, it's progressing. But it's been really tough actually. I started in Swimrun. Now it's been 5 years ago actually. So I live in Gothenburg in Sweden, and I was out trail running and started seeing people in wetsuits running around. So that's when my husband actually said that we probably need to check out what they're doing. So we went to a local shop here and bought our first suits. And at that time, I didn't know how to do freestyle swimming at all. I never tried it in my life. But my husband has. So he gave me some tips and advice. And I went to a Facebook group for women in swimrun. And that's where I saw a shout out from Ulrika, who I've been competing with. And she asked for a partner And I replied to her and said, yeah, I'm willing to try. I've only been swimming for a couple of weeks, but the running.
Wow.
So that's where
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, it seems like I think it definitely safe to say that you picked up the swimming no problem here.
Yeah, no, but I've been taking swimming lessons ever since that. Actually, I go on classes with Sim coaching.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I've been in her classes since then, actually. So I still have a lot to learn.
Sure.
Swimming seems one of those things that there's always incremental gains to be made, no matter how high or how successful you go. Even the top of the top, or their gains are fractions of milliseconds and a little bit different. But I think swimming's there's always room for improvement there.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Nice. So you got your husband got you out there. Were you guys in sport before, or just you would always go out, hit the trails, love kind of being in nature?
Yes, I've always been sort of active in different ways, but I actually played a lot of golf when I was a teenager, and competed in golf, and I also did some orienteering. So I was kind of used to running in nature. But it was always just for fun and for keeping a good health, sort of.
Hey, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
So, exactly.
That's why it's a good way to.
It's a good reason.
So Anna, so pretty much like you started, like you said, 5 years ago, and pretty soon you raced the World Championship 2019, and then again in 2021. So. Why don't you tell us, as I guess looking back to when you qualified the first year, where Chipper and I are at the point where it's like we don't even know, like we have sort of like general, I would say like general fear of the unknown kind of thing. Like we know it's going to be a big day. We know it's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah.
But it's almost like we don't know what we don't know. So ignorance is bliss a little bit. But we'd love to hear kind of like what was your experience sort of training for the World Championship the first year, and maybe anything that, sort of surprised you in that process.
Yeah. So the first year, we got to know that we had a spot in end of July, because so we
wow,
through the
a couple months to cram. That's how I did school.
Yeah,
it was like, oh yeah, we got the final a couple weeks, better get going on the studying. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, so we applied for the ranking applications, but we didn't get a spot in February. We were sort of the next in line. So we realized that if someone cancels, they probably ask us. So everyone told us that, you need to prepare as if you're going to do it. Which was a bit difficult mentally, just to know that you might be doing it. But end of July, we realized that, oh shit, to do this race in just a few weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I had prepared by doing several long runs and also swimming quite a lot. So I think we were both sort of prepared physically. And then mentally, when we knew that we got the spot, we actually reached out to Oscar Olsson and asked him for an hour of just picking his brain of the best advice.
We did the same thing.
Exactly. And he went through the course with us and gave us some training advice for the last couple of weeks. So that was really
cool. Love it.
Just getting to know the course. I also watched some videos from Nicola in Team Envol that are on YouTube. So just get a feel for the course. And for us, since we were not really good swimmer, it was really good to sort of just mentally prepare for where the really long swims are.
Yeah. I love how you're this is kind of how Chris and I are feeling right now. We're trying to be just giant sponges and absorb as much information. That sounds like the same sort of aspect that you tried there.
Yeah.
When you were approaching the World Championship, or ÖTILLÖ, the Swimrun World Championship as it's known, which part were you most sort of concerned with? Was it the 12, 13 hours of activity, or was it the mental aspect of it, or the technical nature of the course? Kind of what aspect did you feel like you really had the most uncertainty with?
For us, I think it was whether we would make the cutoffs at all.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been doing some long trail runs before, so I wasn't that scared about the endurance aspects of it. Today is the day where the big cross country skiing race in Sweden is Vasaloppet.
That's right.
I
Yeah,
did that once, so I know I could go on for like 10, 11 hours. So I wasn't afraid of that part. And we're both sort of trail runners, so the technical terrain, well, we never thought that would be an issue. So it was the swims and sort of the cold sea.
Yeah.
Even though the year we did it the first time, everyone said it was really warm. I think it was 17 degrees in the water. But that's where we did our biggest mistakes. We didn't bring our sleeves the first time.
Okay.
So we got really, really cold.
Yeah, that's we can just chalk that up on the list of tips, right? It's just like
bring everything.
Yeah, just like,
bring
just assume it's going to be cold. Yeah, just assume it's going to be cold, whether at the beginning, the middle, the end, like you don't know, just bring it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And since by the end of the race, you're really, really tired and you're not able to run as fast as you need in order to get up the heat again after the long swims. So, bring your sleeves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That something that you don't think about, even if the air temperature or the forecast is supposed to be a little bit nicer, if you're not running and maybe you're taking a walk break or you're hiking it out or something, your body doesn't have the chance to kind of recharge everything. And we noticed that a little bit when we did ÖTILLÖ Catalina now 2 years ago. Yeah. There was a big section that was sort of covered from, it wasn't getting any sun exposure, but it was a big hill, and we thought, we'll be fine here. But we ended up getting really too cold, and we had to kind of bundle back up, put our swim caps up to try to get some heat in the body again.
Yeah.
That's a really good.
I remember I could barely sort of sense my hands at one point, so I put them under my armpit, under my wetsuit, in order to get some heat into the hands.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So you do the first race. Obviously, you finished the course. You finished in under 13 hours. Is there anything like sort of like immediately after the race where you're like, we could have done this better, we should have done this different?
Besides the arm sleeves.
Besides arm sleeves.
So Ulrika, who I raced with, she actually got some problems when we got to Orne. So she got this SIPE, SIPE, where you start coughing and you get like water in your lungs. So, and we don't really know why, but maybe because she was too cold. We actually walked most part of Orne.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons for why we said, we need to do it again.
Yeah.
Wanted to get some kind of revenge.
It's
which you got.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, from the first year to the second year, you dropped 40 minutes off of your time, which is, it's pretty good.
But we still walked on Orne, I can tell you. But the second time, it was because of myself. Because last year when we did it, I had an injury during the spring, so I didn't even run at all during April, May, and June. So I was not in shape last time. But,
okay, so you
yeah. So when we got to Orne, I was such in pain, so we just had to walk again. But yeah,
Right.
you can still make it.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about sort of chasing cutoffs. I mean, that's when you reached out to us. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
let's give you a different perspective from the people like
From the Oscars
like,
of the world.
Yeah, Oscar himself will say like he doesn't know what the cutoffs are, right? Because that's just
it's
not
so
what he's
not-
worried about. So bless him. But for us mere mortals, cutoffs are a reality. So what advice do you have for us and for people who might be racing ÖTILLÖ later in the year around that?
The first cutoff is at 9, 3 hours into the race. And I don't think that is a cutoff to really you have to care about. We were way ahead of that cutoff, and you're still sort of got a lot of energy when you get there. So I think you don't have to care so much about the first one. The second one is the toughest, I would say. It's the 11:15 cutoff. And I think we had like 15 minutes to that one. And that's sort of, 5 hours into the race.
what makes that one so tough?
I think it's just, it's very, very close.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's a little bit aggressive. And for folks at home, so that's the one in Nam Do.
There's a lot of swimming in between those.
Yeah, there's some pretty big. There's a couple big swims, but there's also a decent amount of running getting from the cutoff at 9 a.m. on Run Moreau to Nam Do.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of the most aggressive one, and it's in the middle of the day, and I think the race organizations feel that if you don't make that one, it will be really, really tough to do the rest. So
yeah,
I think that's the one to look out for. Because then after that one, we had a lot of time for the others. So even though we only had like 10 or 15 to the second one, we had like an hour to the last one.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess just the way you described it is, the race order, they don't want people out there super late. So if you can't make like an aggressive cutoff earlier in the race,
you're gonna have a really hard time.
You're gonna have a really hard time.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, all right, well, maybe you're getting close to the cutoffs, but it isn't like you're sort of
You're
the end
also
is in
closer
sight
to the
kind of
finish.
thing.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time there when Ulrika had problems, I was kind of checking my watch and trying to estimate, can we do the last cutoff even though we are just walking in the speed? And I was trying, you're really tired, but still you want your brain to sort of calculating.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It's the worst place for me.
Yeah. But I realized when we got to the church there and the energy station that, all right, we have enough time. We can actually walk to the last cutoff, and then we can sort of just,
sort of jog it in.
Or just crawl on our knees.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, talking about cutoffs. So there's a cutoff, like basically when you get to Orne.
Yeah.
And then there's one at the end. So they're basically giving you, the cutoff is at 15:30.
Yeah.
To when you get to Orne, and then to leave Orne, you have to be done with that island by 1800.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 2.5 hours for.
Yeah, like if
pace.
if you're like chasing cutoffs, to me it seems to be like if you're just barely hitting the cutoff at Orno, like note to self, you better be running. You're gonna have to run, or it's just not gonna happen.
We've had 3 hours on Orne, both times we've done it. So you need to have some extra time when you get to Orne, for sure.
So a little bit contrary to sort of how traditional race pacing or would be, or strategically would be, is don't start the race too fast, don't go out too fast and burn a lot of energy, and then you're kind of fading off towards the end. Did you two have to kind of think about it almost the reverse, about maybe we do need to put a little bit more effort in to get to through that second cutoff to kind of give you a little bit more space and, you know, the mental load, I guess, or the pressure of trying to hit those cutoffs? Did you kind of adjust your race strategy at all to be a little bit quicker in the beginning?
Yeah, we knew that our strength was the real technical trail, and there's quite a lot of that in the beginning. So we knew that, we could probably sort of go a bit faster there. And then Orna, which is not as technical, that's where we're not going to be so strong. So, I think that was kind of, and then I actually wrote down sort of times for each swim and each run, depending a little bit if it was technical trail or if it was flat, and I think I estimated the swimming sort of 2 minutes per 100 meters for us. So I had some, when you see that sheet with all the times and distances, they have one fast and one slow, and I did something in between, sort of.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I find that sheet and what you're referring to is on the ÖTILLÖ website, on the World Championship page, there's a times and distances PDF, which I've already printed out, and it's like posted to my fridge. Just because.
We're getting it tattooed next week.
But yeah, on that sheet, it has sort of, you know, what people on the pointy end or the fast end are going to be, and where you are sort of on the quote unquote slow end.
Yeah.
Now, you know, this race is it's a long day. It's a big day. Obviously, if you're super fast, it's a faster day than for others. But can you talk to us a little bit about how you managed your nutrition? Because that's definitely something that we're going to be super vigilant on, and would love to hear sort of what your experience was on that.
Yeah, so I use gel from Morten that I know works for me. But then I stop at every aid station and eat as much as I can. Drink and eat as much as I can on each station. And then in between, I take gels as well. But I think that that is a good advice for anyone who's sort of in the end of the race, that take your time and really fuel up, because that will really make a difference whether you will make it to the end, if you have enough energy or not.
Yeah, if you don't have enough gas in the tank, it doesn't matter how good you're feeling. If you don't have enough gas to power the engine, you're not going to be going too awful quick anywhere. And so you had the gels as just kind of a quick shot of energy, and I've noticed through the videos and everything that we've been watching, a lot of quote unquote real food, bananas and bars and things like that at the aid station. So you kind of get a nice mix of those two
exactly that was
types
nice
of food.
Yeah. So I had the gels in a soft flask, so you don't have to sort of tear off every gel. It's easier to have them in the soft flask. And then as soon as there were an aid station, I took bananas or bars in the end, you don't really feel like you want to eat something, but you still need to get in something.
Did you set we got advice from Diane on a show a few weeks ago about just setting a timer? So like every 30 minutes, like her watch would go off and eat. Is that something what you did, or you were just kind of just paying attention and try to make sure that you were getting?
No, that's
food?
What I'm used to from trail running as well. I take something like every 20, 30 minutes or so. Absolutely. And then for the pig swim, you take one gel just before and then one after.
And the Twix.
Twix, exactly.
That's an Oscar special right there. Like, take a fucking gel. Take the fucking gel right before the pig swim. Awesome.
I didn't think the pig swim was that difficult, actually. I thought the there's a long swim after that, like 1,000 meters. I thought that was more difficult actually, because of the cold. I think we didn't really manage to get up the heat after the pig swim there. So there's a long one after a couple of meters, and that was really cold. I remember we actually changed half the distance. We actually changed who was in front, because the one who was in the back was so cold.
That's a great consideration. Are you usually leading the swims then?
Nowadays, the last time we did the race, I led the swims, but the first time we did it, Ulrika led the swims. So
okay,
it's changed over the years.
I mean,
I remember we took turns as well, just to keep up the heat, for like shorter swims as well. So we took turns.
I think that's a really smart consideration. You know, what we've experienced a lot when we're racing is, the person in the back, you get a nice break.
I love being in the
so
back.
to speak.
Yeah. I love it.
Some of us more than others, Chris.
So
but you do get chilly back there. You do get really cold.
Yeah, you do.
That's my problem. You don't have to worry about that.
I was cold at Orcas. I was freezing.
So the swim you're talking about, that's the Getskad?
Yes.
Swim.
Correct.
It's 970 meters. Yeah, that's essentially the last big swim of the day, because after that, and this, we've heard this from multiple people, like basically once you get to Orna and through Orna, the race is basically, you just have to make sure you're not, you just got to stay upright.
Yeah,
and
don't
keep
fall
moving
over.
Forward. But the last bit is sort of the victory lap to get to Uta, I guess.
Yeah. But it's really, really technical trail. Last bit. There's a lot of small islands you have to pass, and last year it was almost like climbing on one of the islands. They put up some ropes, so you actually had to use them to get up. So it was really tricky.
Yeah, and it seems to me like that section, and I'd love to hear sort of your perspective on this, is, we understand that it's super slippery getting, in and out of these islands, and people are falling on their butts and breaking faces and hands and feet and stuff like that. What I'm worried about, I definitely want to stay upright, but sort of, especially towards the end when you're tired and cold, I'd love to hear sort of your advice on like just making sure you're not going cowboy.
You're sure-footed.
Yeah, that you're sure-footed, but also like, is there anything that you wish you would have done, like more push-ups or burpees or sort of strength training to sort of help you kind of muscle in and out of those islands?
I actually never experienced it being so slippery. So no, we didn't have any problems getting in or out of the water.
Oh, that's good then.
Yeah.
We'll still be ready for it. Or we'll try to be.
Pick the right shoes with a good sole. No.
Yeah, makes sense.
I've actually never felt it being so slippery. But yeah, help each other get out of the water. But we don't rush when we're trying to get out of the water either. So maybe that's the difference compared to the top teams.
I mean, that's
pretty
good
smart,
advice right
though,
there too. It's just like, because that's what I'm worried about. Like, I feel like we just have to stay upright.
Yes, of course.
Like, we don't need like a broken butt. To sidetrack us, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually really reassuring to hear that, maybe on the videos they're just picking the hot takes of people slipping and sliding.
Yeah.
For drama.
Maybe.
We'll ask Rasmus.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little and talk about gear. You mentioned you went sans arm sleeves the first year, and that was to a little bit of regret there. And the shoes with the slipping and the traction and gear. Are you choosing shoes with pretty big lugs, like 4 type millimeter lugs. I know the VJ's shoes are pretty popular over in Europe, but we don't really have those over in the States. So we're trying to kind of sort out what the locals are using to traverse all the terrain.
Yeah, I use the VJ iRock shoes. And I've done that for 15, 20 years maybe, because I had them when I did orienteering, even before I started swim running. So I've always been running in those shoes. So yeah, maybe you should get someone to ship them over to you and you can try them out. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can get them here. You just there just aren't a lot of people using
them.
Yeah.
No, I've hardly ever slipped in those. So I think they're just amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm getting my wallet out right now.
And then in sort of other gear, you mentioned that you use like a soft flask to put your gels in and stuff. Are you wearing sort of an undershirt, and then with multiple, you have like a flask for water as well, or a cup for water? Like, what did you do sort of on that end?
I only had that soft flask for gels, and I use a linen with some pockets. And then I have the Arc Warner X. I had that last year.
We saw a lot of people had that. That was a popular, it seems like the ideal suit for
amazing.
The conditions of ÖTILLÖ.
Yeah. It's
awesome.
Easy to run in, and the neoprene is thick enough, so I was never cold last year.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
Really good. That's
okay.
Really good. Do you have any sort of parting advice for us and for our listeners on like, hey, we're racing this race for the first time? Like,
my last advice would be that the night before, between Saturday and Sunday, try to get a really good night's sleep. Last night will be difficult to sleep.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So try to get a really good night's sleep between Saturday and Sunday. Because
noted.
You have to get up early. I think we
definitely no partying
or something. And get your gear on before you go to the breakfast. That's a good advice.
Oh.
We didn't do it the first time, and then we really got into a rush to put everything on after we had eaten. So it was much fun to actually put on everything on and be ready, and then go and eat breakfast.
And I could see that, because the last thing you would want before the race even starts is to be stressed out
You're
of your mind to even be making the race.
That? Yeah. It's like, oh, Chipper, hurry up, dude.
Yeah. Plus, I don't even know if my wetsuit could fit after the breakfast that I hear they're serving. It's like, I'll take another bowl of oatmeal, sure.
Oh, muesli? Oh, sounds good. No, if they have semlas, then we're in trouble. Anna, we really want to thank you for taking the time to come on. This was super instructive for us. And I mean, I guess we'll meet you in September, hopefully.
I hope so.
But again, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you later on this year then.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Anna is a 2-time finisher of ÖTILLÖ. She's going back this year.
Nice. Gonna get that whole run in on Orno this time.
Yeah.
I feel it.
Yeah, I thought her advice was really well taken, and sort of just understanding, being mindful of cutoffs and where you should just knowing what's happening around you, I think was super helpful.
Yeah, and hear how she kind of managed through some times when it did get really tight, I guess, for her and her partner. It sort of was creeping up on them, and sort of how they handled that from a mental point of view when the body wasn't doing the best that it could. And that was a really, really great thing, because that could totally be our scenario too as well, potentially. So we're making sure that we're being prepared for that. So thank you, Anna, again, for taking the time to chat with us there.
Definitely. If that wasn't enough,
we got a double dose.
We have another guest.
Not just any guest.
It's true. It's true. We have what we've been calling sort of the walking sort of knowledge bomb, just like a constant knowledge bomb. So we asked Andy Blow, founder of Precision Fuel and Hydration, to come on. He's been on the show before. He's a 3-time finisher of ÖTILLÖ, and he basically came in to help us dial what we think we would all agree is a very important part of our race strategy, which is going to be nutrition and hydration. We've had some issues with that in the past.
Yep.
We've learned that we need to be fueling like way more than we have been. But yeah, it was awesome for Andy to come on and just essentially tell us what to do, which is all I ever want in life. Just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah, and it was really good to get such a great perspective from someone that has done the race multiple times and definitely performing well there. Yeah. I've definitely struggled with the nutrition aspect and hearing that, okay, there is enough time 5 months out. We have time to work on it. And this is something that personally I'm focused on. I know Chris is focused on it as well. Making sure if you're not putting gas in the tank for 10 to 14 hours, you ain't going to make it to the end.
Yeah.
So we got to pay good attention to it.
If you heard last week's episode with Lars and Jonas, Jonas is having like 20 gels or 18 gels or something like that.
They're gobbling those things down.
It's crazy. Yeah. So this part of it, this is a more tactical discussion when we're talking about gut training. We're talking about how to get your body ready to take that many calories, to have a good day, to make sure that you keep your energy levels high. And Andy's awesome.
Yes. Take it away, Andy Blow.
All right, we're super stoked to have the one and only Andy Blow back on the show. The time that this show airs, we will be 5 months out from ÖTILLÖ, the Swimrun World Championship, our first, not Andy's. And before we get started, way back in episode 24, Andy came on, Chipper and I did the sweat test. We got some product from Precision Hydration, and I have to say, like, that's really changed the game for me in terms of, maybe it's hyperbolic to say life-changing, but in terms of race life-changing, it was definitely performance-changing. Like, I've had great results. I've been totally on top of my nutrition and hydration, and really, the only thing that changed was having Andy come on and learning about Precision Hydration. So, Andy, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate the invite. Always, as you know, always love talking swimrun.
Love it.
We're the only place to do that in town, so welcome aboard.
I love it. I love it.
That'll be 3 of us then.
Yeah.
So you're actually in the States, which is nice that you got out of the UK for a little bit. And so how's it been? It's been a while since you've been to America, eh?
Yeah, it has. It's been, exactly 2 years ago. I was here for Catalina.
Yeah.
And when we came back, we heard about this airliner that had landed in LA, and there was some like coronavirus thing. Mm-hmm. And then we flew home, and then the world just, shut down for 2 and a bit years.
Crazy.
And now we're back.
Crazy.
Yeah. So it's actually delightful to be back. We've had a really, really good trip. I spent a couple of days in Miami and Tampa with doing some work with Major League Baseball because their spring training is kicking off.
Nice.
I love it.
And also with a bunch of triathletes, really nice bunch of guys and girls in Miami Triathlon Club. Had a chat with them. And then I'm now, as you know, in the same time zone as you guys, a little bit further north up in Portland, Oregon. Doing a few bits here before I fly home tomorrow.
Wow. Well, thanks for squeezing us in. So Precision Hydration is no longer Precision Hydration. It's Precision Fueling and Hydration, which is really important because it's like we've loved the gels. Now there's a new chew and everything. But before we get into sort of training for ÖTILLÖ, it seems like the evolution, it was in sort of a natural evolution for the company to get into that space. Is that how you saw it from your side of things?
Definitely. I mean, as you guys know from the previous chats, my Achilles heel as an athlete was probably more hydration than fueling related. And that was where we were very laser focused when we started with the sweat test and the sodium levels in the drinks, being individualized. And that served us well for a number of years. But right from the day dot, we were having conversations with athletes about fueling as well, because it's kind of, you can't talk about hydration with athletes and not talk about fueling. So we always had those conversations, but not so much in public. It wasn't like a front facing thing. We were trying to, extend our expertise in hydration. And then we'd always talked about fueling and what people should do alongside it and how we might want to get into that. But it was really the pandemic and the enforced time to focus on the business in the long run. And we kind of had to stop all the day-to-day running around. It created a lot of time and space. And we sat down and we said, well, we're going to use this time fruitfully to launch a fueling line of products. And we did that. We launched a gel first of all, and a carbohydrate drink. And then what we thought was we're going to have to see how these go and see what people think of them. And the early reception to them was amazing, really, really strong. And it was kind of at that point we felt that then it necessitates a name change for the business, because for people who bump into us for the first time, or even existing customers, it's kind of clunky and difficult to explain. If we're called Precision Hydration, but we also do these fueling products. And so, as you can tell, we spent a ton of money on a really expensive
yeah, the rebrand was top notch
to come up with this like incredibly cool new name of Precision Fueling Hydration. But we have this advert that used to be on the TV in the UK for a fence painting, a fence varnish thing that was called Ron Seal. It says it does exactly what it says on the tin, and then that was kind of the approach that we thought people, if you'd read the name, what we do.
No need to overthink it. And I remember when the gels first came out, Chris and I were really stoked to try some out. And luckily we were racing Odyssey Austin was that in 20?
I think it was Casco.
It was a Casco in 20. Yeah. And we grabbed some. We saw them at an aid station. And I took a fistful of them because I'm like, I need a few of these later to take home back to training with me. But popped it open, literally never try anything new on race day. Let me toss this gel down the hatch, see how it goes. I guess you can see who between Chris and I needs the most help on the fueling and hydration side already. But I was immediately delighted.
Yeah, they were great. They were delightful.
The texture and the taste, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome to the point where that was a Casco at Orcas Island. My fueling strategy was to go shopping at the first aid station for a couple gels to throw on once I confirmed that they were going to be on the course.
Yeah, and now the jumbo gels as well, which is the 90. Yeah. But anyway, but yeah, so we're talking about ÖTILLÖ, where the Swimrun World Championship. We're 5 months out from this behemoth of an endurance event that we're looking forward to, and Chris is dialed in on his nutrition and hydration. I have a little bit of work to be done. I did Orcas Island at 6. How long? What was that? 6.5 something hours out there. I had trouble for the vast majority of it, what some people would refer to as a bonk. But I really kind of put myself back into school on that. I thought I kind of had it figured out. Oh, I've done ultra runs and this kind of thing. But now I think I realize I've really been under fueling, and I've been trying to kind of increase that. So what, quote unquote, training your gut, is this something that you kind of advise to endurance athletes that need to get back on track with a fueling plan?
Yeah, I would say, based on the experience we've had and my own experience back in the past, certainly doing Ironman and then the longer ÖTILLÖ races, I would say most athletes tend to underfuel rather than overfuel. And as a rule, it's not obviously everyone. Some people get it right, and I'm sure there will be cases of a few people overdoing it. But I would say you're going to see 60 or 70% of people at least under fueling. And so part of that, I think, is just lack of knowledge about how high the levels of energy intake could be to support your performance, or should be. And part of it is this whole thing that you've mentioned about gut training, and like people, and I'm the same, everyone's nervous about eating too much or drinking too much and having stomach problems, because we know that they can be race ending. So Matt Dixon and I chatted about this recently, and we were both saying, look, 10 years ago, we were advising athletes to be frugal about what they ate, because avoiding gut problems was seen as a really high priority. There's been a bit of a mind shift change in a lot of athletes, especially at the front end of races now, where there's an active sort of push to eat more calories, taking more carbohydrates, because time and time again, when you're really pushing your endurance envelope, when it's above 3, 4, 5 hours, then there's a strong correlation between being able to eat, consume and digest more calories and being stronger towards the end. And what all of us want to be is feeling reasonably good in hours 6, 7, 8, 9 or whatever, because it's a long enough day when you're not feeling amazing. When you're really dying on your backside, it's horrid. And the dynamics, we all know as well, the dynamics of a team race, a pairs race, super important that you both try to stay on top of it, because you can only move as fast as the slowest person. You've probably got seats on the plane home next to each other, so you still want to be friends when you fly home. And if one of you is like really struggling, it can genuinely be hard to keep your team together.
Yeah. Now let me ask you. So it seems like there used to be all this talk about, hey, you want to be fat adapted and all this stuff, and you shouldn't have to rely on gels because you can just burn your own fat that you have on board. And I mean, I have plenty of it, but it seems like, talking about, hey, you should try to be able to take as many calories as you can, and up kind of what you're doing, especially for these longer events. Now, what do you think has sort of changed the thinking there, or is there a change of thinking? Is it 6 of one, half a dozen of the other?
I would say so. Going back in the 90s, say the carbs were the thing. There wasn't much talk about being fat adapted. It was all about carbohydrate, and there was this kind of notional ceiling of maybe 60 grams of carbs per hour was seen as, the research tended to indicate that was a high amount of carbs for athletes to take. In the 2000s and beyond, a lot of elite athletes, I don't think the trend towards taking in a lot of carbs has changed at the really sharp end of most elite sports. So Tour de France riders, elite marathon runners, this and that, we've not seen in reality a huge shift away from that. What we've seen them is a gradual increase in the amount of carb that maybe the average top person's taking. I would say in the perception of the rest of the world, the rest of us, and the casual observer, is that there's been this big push towards fat adaptation, keto diets, and that kind of thing, because the idea of living low carb and even athletically training low carb has become massive on social media, in the press. There's a lot of chat about it, and I think ultra running is a huge world where that is really, really prevalent. And I actually wrote a piece about fasted training, which is kind of not the same thing, but crosses over with fat adapted training recently, and spoke to like ultra running coaches like Jason Koop and Dina Griffin, who's a nutritionist in Colorado who works with a lot of ultra runners, to get their opinions on it. And everyone was saying the same thing. It's like fat adaptation is a thing. And there are probably a cohort of people, certainly in day-to-day life, for whom it's a really good strategy. But for high-performance endurance athletes, it's often not a great strategy. And it's certainly not what any of the elite athletes are doing. We really don't see hardly any elite athletes doing low carb, because at the end of the day, to oxidize carbohydrate at a high rate when you're exercising, that's what gives you the best efficiency, because you use less oxygen to go fast, and also it allows you to keep your brain well fed with glucose, which makes you feel good and feel sharp. And you can trug along all day on fat adaptation, no question, but you're not going to go all that fast. As soon as you start getting up above 60-70% VO2 max, it's really, really difficult to perform without burning, because your body switches to burning the fast fuels. And so, like anything, I think there's extremists on both camps. I mean, do you want to be burnt? Do you want to take carbohydrates in all of your sessions all of the time, no matter what? I wouldn't agree with that, but I certainly wouldn't agree with the stance of saying you want to limit carbohydrates in your hardest and longest training sessions and races, because that is just like putting an artificial limiter on your performance.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
That's really interesting. Why do you think that the sort of the pointy end, as we said, kind of steer clear of these, for lack of a better word, food or consumer driven kind of trends? Is it because they have the resources to have such a deep like science backing with all their research and everything, and they're like, we haven't seen it, or how is the pointy end able to steer clear of all the trends like the keto or low carb or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything more complicated than they do the shit that works. They trial and error things. So that's what happens at the elite pointy end of most things, is that the people doing the really difficult stuff, really pushing themselves as hard as they can, they skip a meal and then try and train and they blow. And then the next time they learn and they don't skip a meal. They eat 3 joules an hour instead of 2 joules an hour during a race and go faster. And then they try 4 joules an hour to see if they'll go even faster. And it's like a whittling process of years of trial and error. And where you see the vast majority of these athletes end up is on, if they've got heavy training loads, very high carbohydrate diets and very high carbohydrate intakes during races. So I actually, even though there's this often a perception that elite athletes have access to information or knowledge that the rest of us don't, I don't see that as particularly true. I would say it's trial and error, and then it's evolution of ideas. The strongest ideas survive, and carbohydrates for fast endurance athletes have survived, 100 years now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sense. Now, well, let's talk about ÖTILLÖ. So this, where we're talking, if we're lucky, a 10-hour event. If we're, having a day, 14, 15-hour event. You've raced this race before. We're dealing with cold weather. You're dealing with potentially rough water swims, tough terrain, the woods, scrambling and stuff. How should we be thinking about an event of this magnitude without, obviously without trying to put it on some pedestal so we're freaking ourselves out, but how do we take something that's such a massive day in terms of endurance and think about, well, how are we going to fuel for something like this?
Yeah, it is an epic event, and there are lots of variables to consider. I think if we start with the fueling side rather than the hydration, that's kind of more consistent because it doesn't get affected as much by the weather and stuff. But your fueling starts, at least sort of 72 hours out from the event. So you're going to be eating more simple, or at least not highly fibrous carbohydrates. So that's extra servings of, white bread and or pasta or rice or whatever your favorite kind of things are with your main meals in the last 2-3 days, because that's what tops off your glycogen stores in your muscles. And if you're a well-trained athlete, which you guys are, then you end up with super compensated glycogen stores. So your glycogen stores need to be like massively topped off, because during that day you are going to rip through all of those stores.
All of it.
And then some.
Yeah, and some. So basically an extra 20-30 grams of carbs stored is like rocket fuel on the day. So I'd say that's super important. And that includes, by the way, I would say, even though it's an inhumanly early start for the race, I would be maximizing breakfast, and I always tend to go for, and I hear a lot of other people recommend, low fiber carbohydrates. So the kind of opposite to the stuff you would be recommended to eat for a healthy diet, because what you don't want is loads of fiber sitting in your gut, because that's weight, and that's also just going to make you want to go to the toilet in the race, which you obviously don't want. So you kind of go for the simple processed stuff that you would perhaps normally avoid if you were trying to eat a more healthy diet.
So we're talking like white bread,
cereal bars,
Okay.
oatmeal with sugar and whatever. Really, it's like basically just kind of fuel for the engine.
Yeah, you hear that, Chipper? Stay away from like the quinoa, like sorghum, ancient grains bowl for breakfast.
No ancient grains for breakfast? Okay, I'll stick to I like the picky oats that they have.
Picky oats work
those are
well,
good.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of thing is absolutely perfect. And then that basically stops at breakfast, obviously, and then you're going to get into the race itself. I'm a guy who likes to have a gel in the last 15 minutes before the start. Some people do, some people don't, but that is because the simple theory on that is that you are full of adrenaline before the start, and it takes about 15 minutes for the sugar in a gel to go through your stomach into your bloodstream, so it's accessible. And in that first 10, 15, 20 minutes, you will be burning a really savage amount of energy, because you are going to be fired up. You are
from the heart rate,
hard flush, you're going to be nervous, and so that just gives you a little bit of extra there. And then, go on.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop here. I feel like kind of some of the old wisdom that I've heard is like, oh, you don't want to have a gel right before the race because it spikes your blood sugar and then you're going to have a crash and that kind of thing. So it sounds like a little bit, or you're banking on the bigger breakfast that you had to kind of provide you a little longer, slower burning fuel. And then the gel's not necessarily a huge spike in that, or what's the thinking behind that?
No, it will still spike you. But that if you time the spike correctly, the thing not to do probably is have a gel 45 minutes before the start. That's why I'm saying, like, very specifically, have it in the last 10 or 15 minutes, because by the time your engine is running hot, you'll be burning the fuel. So you don't get this big insulin release. When you start exercising, you see the insulin release is not as strong, which is what brings your sugar levels down. And there are a few people, it's called rebound hypoglycemia is what you're talking about, where you get a big spike and a big crash. And there are a few people that happens to. And I guess you just kind of have to learn in training, a bit of trial and error, is that before big sessions, if you bang a gel and with 10 minutes to go and you do feel, crappy after 20 minutes, then if that happens a few times, it might not be for you. Okay. But I would say, in my experience with people, I would always say to them, look, at least try this out, because the bottom line is you've got a window during that race of getting calories in. And when we do an athlete's nutritional breakdown for a race, we always consider that 15 minutes pre as kind of their in-race intake as well. Okay. And that's an extra 30 grams of carbs or whatever that you've consumed. And all that we know for sure is that by the end of the day, you are going to be out of fuel. So, more fuel, basically better.
Right.
I'm on board. I'm glad we're starting this 5 months out, because we have enough time to practice.
Yeah.
It's a huge component of it. So
I think that's a big takeaway from it, right?
I don't know what happened, but we look like we know what's going on.
The thing is, I even amaze myself now thinking back to how I would have approached this, 10, 15 years ago, and I wasn't doing all of these things quite right. And what's accelerated my learning with this is I've done ÖTILLÖ a few times since then, but also worked with a ton of athletes that are doing that and other types of events, and you just see these trends. And I'll probably keep saying it to the point where it gets boring, but just basically, to a degree, more consumption, more calories without making you feel sick is better, is going to be better. The level of energy expenditure is so high, and the time during a swim run race to get the energy in is relatively low, because we spend a lot of time in the water. It's like, what is it, 7Ks, or is it even 10Ks?
It's 10Ks.
10Ks of swimming, isn't it? Yeah. I blanked out 3. There's the pig swim. I blanked it out of my mind. But it's, so you can't obviously eat and drink in those times. There's a lot of other times when you're scrambling over rocks and doing other stuff. So when the time to eat is quite limited, or relatively limited compared with in a normal kind of endurance race, certainly compared with a triathlon or something. So, getting your fueling in early and relatively aggressively is probably a big part of the strategy. And I reckon if I was going to tell you guys what to do, one thing that I didn't do, it would be to carry a few more gels and a few more chews or whatever from the start, so that you can have the luxury of kind of not worrying about, I better save a couple because I don't know how far it is to the next stage. So when you get into that mentality, you're doing it all wrong. It's like when the gas needle is like really close to low, and you suddenly start having to drive at 30 instead of 60.
Or put it in neutral when you're going downhill.
Yeah. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be fueling. So, carry quite a few. I know it's difficult with swim run, but the things like those PF90 gels that we have in the pouches would be absolutely perfect for that, because you can tuck a couple of those under, each arm or whatever.
Yeah, I actually just tried those at the LA Marathon. I had like the 90 and I was just like holding it, and it was great. I mean, it's so good. I mean, the hardest part for me was trying not to drink the whole thing. And I was like, I'm just going to take a swig. Maybe that's 30 grams. I mean, I don't know what it was, but it was delicious, and I managed to. It lasted for a good portion, maybe 3/4 of the race. But so we've gotten some advice from people that have raced ÖTILLÖ where they're like, yep, try to get your calories in early. Definitely want to take a gel right before the pig swim. You want to take a lot of nutrition when you get on Orna. And would you say like we should just sort of decouple our fueling from where the aid stations are and just be like, all right, every 30 minutes we got to get something. Aid station is just kind of a bonus thing, but not be like, hey, let's just, because we've done this at races. We did this at Casco, which is like, hey, we're just going to take a gel at every aid station. And maybe that made sense then, but for something like this where, who knows how long it's going to take, we don't know. Would you say that strategy would make sense, kind of decoupling it all?
A little bit, I would say. You're going to have to, in a race of that length, rely on the aid stations to a degree, because you're probably going to struggle to carry everything you need to get you through the day in good shape. But I would say for you guys, it's going to be, if you're using something like our gels, which are 30 grams of carbs, you're going to be in the zone of 2 to 3 of those per hour, between 60 and 90 grams per hour. And so if we took the upper one of that and you did 10 hours, that's like 30 gels. You're not going to carry 30 gels.
Yeah.
So you might carry, though, I think I'll have to check back, but I reckon I maybe carried like 8 or 9 when I did it last time. And I probably would have even now go for a bit more than that, 10 or 12, because although it's a bit bulky to begin with, having the reassurance that you can do that, and then you can pick off at aid stations when you need to and like replenish is a good idea. And I agree wholeheartedly with what those people have told you about making sure that you get some savage calories in before the long swims, because the drop in body temperature, and then I've come out the pig swim twice when it's been a cold year and been literally like gibbering, shivering, can't open a packet, and it takes 3-4 Ks to warm up. And that means you can go for a solid hour easily without eating or drinking anything if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Which then is not a good
behind,
place to be. So like timing it, knowing where you are. We just got some light coloured hand paddles and wrote each of the sections on the hand paddles, and then had a bit of an idea where we were going to pick up food or where we were going to eat. And before the long swims, there was a lot of chat between JP and I, who I was racing with last time, where it's like, we're going to have a gel now because we're getting in the water in 5 minutes, and maybe you'd even have 2 if you could. It was sort of that's general theme of like early and aggressive with the fueling is a good one.
Okay.
So before we get to sort of training for this, can we talk a little about hydration? Like, we've heard you can drink the water because, all that stuff. You can drink the ocean water. But I think we're pretty comfortable. We know what our protocol is sort of the night before a swim run. Yeah. But, this swim run's going to be twice as long as anything we've done. So does that protocol change at all?
Not really. You can't. If you pre-hydrate to the best of your ability, have a electrolyte drink the night before, one in the morning. Drinking more is only going to result in peeing more, feeling more uncomfortable, and you kind of, unlike with the carb loading, you can't fluid load anywhere near as effectively. So you have a very strong electrolyte drink the night before. You have one with your breakfast in the morning, and I would probably on the ferry ride, to the start, I'm kind of sipping on another one as I feel I need to, but other than that, it's kind of business as usual. And then the hydration requirement of ÖTILLÖ is massively dictated by the weather. You could if you had a cold year and the water's cold, you're not going to sweat much all day long, even running in that wetsuit, because it's just the air temperature and combined with a low body temperature from being in the water for extended periods. You could probably do it relatively light on fluids and electrolytes, albeit light for a 10-hour event.
Relatively light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done it in other years where I did it one year. Maybe it was the first time I did it. But one year I did it and it was glorious weather and it was really quite hot. I mean, not like savagely hot, but hot enough when you're running in a wetsuit. Like the long run was really hot because it was later in the day. Back then, when the first time we did it, we had triathlon wetsuits that were cut down. So we weren't kind of taking them off very much because it was really difficult to do and difficult to get them back on. So we did a lot of the running with a really thick, like 3-5 mil wetsuit on.
Amazing.
And it was pretty nasty. And in those conditions, you have to be really smart and do things like have a soft flask with you. Before that long run, there's an aid station normally on the pontoon before you get in the water. And we were having a full drink, taking a full 16, 18 ounces at that aid station, refilling the bottle, the soft flask, inside the wetsuit because it's only a short swim across to the other side, and then carrying that and making sure we drank that on the run. And I think even doing that on that long run, because the aid station is so far into it, I've been horridly thirsty every time I've got there, which does tell you that you are by that point losing performance, undoubtedly. So I think that's a big consideration is hydrating up in advance of the long run. And then, I mean, the thing about drinking the water, you can, and I have taken a few sips, but it's really, really difficult thing to do while you're swimming because obviously you're trying to breathe and stuff. So,
I guess it depends on the swell.
Yeah. I mean, if it's on the swell, you might get force fed quite a bit. But I would say try to. That's again, it's part of the trial and error process in the next few months. Is going out and avidly recording during your longer training sessions how much you're drinking, what you weigh before, what you weigh afterwards, how much weight you're losing, how do you feel when you're losing a lot of body weight through sweating? Is that negatively affecting your performance? And then adjusting the amount that you drink in sessions to try to figure out. So you can at least go into that race with an idea of, am I like a 16 ounces an hour kind of guy, or am I 24 ounces an hour kind of guy, or what's... Mm-hmm. And the great thing about carrying a soft flask and doing all your drinking out of that is at least you can have a fairly accurate idea of how much you are consuming. Whereas people that are using cups at the aid stations, it's kind of fine, you're getting liquid in, but it's not a very accurate way of calibrating what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly a huge thing that I would recommend is every aid station where there's a significant run after it, take a full flask from that aid station. You don't have to drink it all, but it's no stress to run with it in your hand. And if you end up dumping a bit out before you get in the next swim, so be it. But take your time.
Rather have more than be way undercooked.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, not to go back all the way back to what we were having for breakfast, but where does caffeine sort of play a role in this? I know you've talked about it a little bit before. I'm love coffee and stuff, and I know they have different caffeinated gels, some with more caffeine than others that'll make your pupils jump off your face.
Yeah.
So where does that work for you? And obviously that's something that you'll probably want to work in practice, but where does caffeine kind of fit into it?
Yeah, I think caffeine's useful in a long race like that. If you are a habitual coffee drinker and you use caffeine generally, you certainly wouldn't want to probably abstain from it, because that is going to make you feel quite lousy. So I would say caffeinate as you normally do before the race. So if you would normally get up and have a coffee or two, then I would do that on race morning. The thing about caffeine is that it is unlike carbohydrate, which is kind of in, burn, and kind of sort of out the other side. Caffeine, the way it works is it gets into your system, and it's a stimulant. It works on the brain and the nervous system, and it is metabolized, and it decays, and it has a half-life. So it kind of drops away as it's metabolized. Different people's speed of metabolization of caffeine is different, but the rough guidance is always about 5 hours or so is probably the half-life of caffeine for most people, which by what that means is that it will have disappeared by half after 5 hours. And so in a long race, it's a bit like going to a bar and drinking, and you don't want to go to the bar and drink so much you get super drunk immediately, so it's not smashing loads of caffeine, but you want to keep just having a drink every here and there, just to keep yourself
buzz on.
Keep yourself in the mood, and caffeine's the same. You don't want to hit it too hard and then let it drop, but so it's a case of probably caffeinating like normal before the race. And then I would say a caffeinated gel normally has somewhere between 50 and 100 milligrams of caffeine in it. And an espresso is usually quoted as being around 70 milligrams or something like that. So if you had one or two of the caffeine gels, in an hour, if you're a regular coffee user, that's, if they're the lower strength ones, that's probably not a bad thing. You might bump that to one every couple of hours if they're a stronger one, something like that. And that's probably just going to drip enough caffeine in. But caffeine takes about 15 minutes to get into your bloodstream, but it takes about 40 minutes to peak in your bloodstream. So a real tactic that some people fall down on is they'll start thinking really late in the race, I need some caffeine. And by that time, it probably is a bit too late. You're better off kind of getting your levels up and keeping them up, rather than I know we're not talking about a marathon, but the classic one is people who smash caffeine at 20 miles into a marathon. It's probably not even fully in their system until after they cross the line. So, So it's kind of ramp it up and then just drip some in and keep it up.
Yeah, that's a knowledge bomb right there.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you, Andy. So we're 5 months out from the race. How should we be thinking about our training? I know you alluded to on our long runs and our long swim run sessions, make sure we're sort of keeping track, try to take more nutrition, try to take as many gels as we can, try to do 2 an hour at least, work on our hydration, and then sort of keep track. Can you just give us a little bit more of a roadmap on what you think we should do?
Yeah, I think it's a case of, or what we just always call it, organized trial and error. So what you've described there, it's making sure in the training sessions that most closely simulate the intensity and duration of the race. Obviously, I appreciate when you're doing a 10-hour race, there'll be few that go for anywhere near that duration, but I'm talking about stuff which is kind of beyond 2 hours probably for you guys. It's really is a case of religiously caffeinating and having a gel in that 15 minutes before, having pre-hydrated as you would for the race, taking in 2/3 gels or whatever the format is. It doesn't have to be gels. It's like 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour early on, recording that, seeing if it's better for you, whether you take it all in kind of a big hit or whether you take 3 doses, a dose every 20 minutes or so, and then evaluating immediately after the session's over, writing down, details about how did your stomach feel? How did you perform? Did you feel like you were craving sugar and wanted more energy? Did you feel like you were a bit sicky and like you'd had too much? And just building up that mental database of how you perform on different levels. And if you do that, the great thing is with 5 months to go, you can do kind of, I would say, like fact finding for the next 3 months. And then the final 2 months, you should have it a bit more locked in. And then what you move to is what you mentioned, Chipper, which is like gut training, which is then settling on, okay, well, if this is the level I can comfortably do, if I'm a 60 grams an hour guy and I've kind of established that with a bit of trial and error, let's see if I can push myself up to be a 70 or 75 grams by incrementally turning the screw for 8 weeks, because that's the kind of time frame that seems to be effective for people. It's like training most physiological systems in the body. When you start training, like 6 weeks later, you see quite a big effect generally, don't you? And it's sort of it's a very broad but decent rule of thumb to say if you want to kind of change the body a little bit, then doing something for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks is a sensible time period to expect to be able to affect a change. And so if you guys use 12 weeks of a bit more randomized, playing around, trial and error, recording the numbers, and then when you think you know where you're at, then turning the screw in your big sessions to train yourself up on it, I think that would be an incredibly useful process to undergo, and one that basically I can assure you that 95% of the rest of the field won't be doing, and it'll give you a competitive advantage.
Well, I guess we won't be able to release this show then.
We'll have to hold it back.
Well, actually, Chipper, you started doing this, I've noticed, where you're just at least
on my Strava, just
putting in just like a little note what you're taking for nutrition and hydration or fueling. And then Strava also has a little like, how does this feel, like easy all the way to super hard, and I guess you can kind of dictate some other things, but. So, I mean, essentially, like if we're doing we usually do our big swim runs on Saturday. So if we're going to focus on, race pace swims and quick transitions and fueling at 3 gels an hour or whatever, it's just another part of our practice and our strategy, essentially, is how you kind of have to build it into everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I still think that everyone sort of, I don't want to say quite rightly, but understandably, the big focus is on conditioning, isn't it? Always, it's like, and equipment. Equipment probably gets more than its fair share of the look in, because we all like new kit and we all want to talk about whether the Arc wetsuit is faster than the Roka wetsuit or the Head wetsuit or whatever. And in my experience, not to put any of those things down, as long as your kit is comfortable and fits you. I've done ÖTILLÖ in different types of shoes, different types of wetsuits, and that's not what makes a defining difference. Your kit can fail and horribly let you down, or if you're really unlucky, it can like fit you badly or something like that, and then that can cause you problems, blisters or rubs or just a poor stroke. But that aside, the kind of conditioning gets all of the look in, and the fueling and hydration piece is a very rush job very close to the race. And so I just think that changing that emphasis, and as you're already doing in your mind, and recording it in Strava is perfect, because you can just like mouse back through that and look, and it's like, it's obvious. Then you see these pictures build up. You don't have to be a full on spreadsheet guy to get this right. You can just take enough notes to remind you, and it'll help.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well, I think it's really easy for people to say, oh, I have the perfect plan, and you can have it all written out on your paddles and all this stuff. But rarely does a race ever go perfect or unfold amazing for everybody.
Yeah.
What is sort of your recommended protocol for when you do start to feel a bonk oncoming, or you're in one? What should you do? Do you stop and sit down on the side of the road, or do you try to get as much calories in? What do you recommend to athletes that you're working with?
Yeah, when I was younger and less experienced, I would just, you know, either get really angry or upset and lose all hope and try to give up, you know, and which is clearly not a very good strategy. And I think what I've recognized as I've got older and more experience with races is that you have to sort of be as unemotional about it as you can, which is difficult because in a race that you've trained for really, really hard and means a lot, and especially if your partner's going strong, when your performance starts to tail off and go downhill, it's a really depressing thing to happen. But what you have to kind of quickly do is, I always try to think of it as like jumping into more like an objective problem solving mode. And the first thing you do when you've got a big problem to overcome is you assess the situation. And a great thing, if you've gone into it at least with a plan for hydration and fueling and some knowledge of what's worked for you in training, the first thing I start to do is like backtrack for the last 90 minutes or 2 hours and start to think, how much have I realistically eaten and drunk? How much electrolyte have I taken in? What symptoms am I showing? And, you know, because what I'm going to do if I've already been smashing 90 grams of carbs an hour is different to if I've only managed to get 40 in. Because if I'm down at 40, there's a very good indication that more energy consumption will take 15 or 20 minutes to get in, but that's going to then help me come out the other side. If I've taken loads on already, but throwing more on top is probably not the right answer. So you kind of need this rolling ledger in your head of what you've been doing, because principally probably the 2 or 3 main ways you can screw your race up or feel like that are in your control is not eating or drinking enough, eating or drinking too much of one element, or pacing it wrong. And you can hydrate and fuel really well, but if your pace is 10% quicker than what you've trained for, no amount of fueling and hydration can make up for that. So in that scenario, if you're really starting to blow, you've got to be humble and you've got to just back off, and you've got to accept that even the most experienced of us get excited and carried away and go off too hard, and then just deal with it. You know, you can't kind of go back and correct that one other than slowing down. But if on the other hand, your problem is a bit more related to, well, I've only drunk 200 mils an hour and I know I should be at 500. Well, there's kind of an obvious fix. But normally it involves like slowing down, assessing, talking with your partner, and then trying things out. Try eating more if that's what your instinct is to do, and then allow 15 or 20 minutes for things to like kick in, and hopefully you start to climb out the hole. That's the mindset which I would approach it, I would think.
And that's why it's so great to track it and have knowledge of that too. Is, oh, I've trained, and oh yes, I am under, because I looked on my paddle, I should have had 8 gels and only had 2. That's a problem. It's the same way. Oh, we never train at 7 minute per mile pace. We usually run 8, so I can't hold this pace. So having your nutrition and your fueling tied into your practice and paying more attention to it, I guess, is the best way to know to problem solve the quickest. Sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've always said, I said this to JP when we went into it. I said to him, at some point today, like one or both of us is going to just be having a horrible time. So we all go
hopefully not races at the same time.
Yeah, no, exactly. It never is it? It's always like one and then the other. And I said, one thing that I'll say is, like, when I'm having a horrible time, I'll tell you, and we'll deal with it. And please don't get too upset by that. And I will try not to get upset when you're slowing me down or whatever and feeling grumpy. And just like, if we're really not happy with each other or the situation, like, let's not fall out. You know, we can run along in silence for a bit or whatever, but let's kind of work through this. And and sure enough, in the race, you know, we were on the long run bit and all, and James is a little bit fitter than me, and, you know, kind of, you can tell he's like going at my pace rather than the other way around. And we didn't speak very much. And at one point he kind of was drifting across the road and bumping my elbow a little bit, and I was ready to like smack him with a paddle or something like that. But you just have to retain that mindset of actually, you know, no, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And one thing I would always say is, like, you see a lot of people out on the course at different times, and honestly, no matter how bad your race is going, there will be people whose race is going worse than yours. And James and I were running like 2 minutes per kilometre slower than we thought we would be on the long run, and dying on our backsides. And then we're going up this hill, and then we overtake this couple that are like fighting with each other and struggling, and just even, you know, they are having the most horrific time. And as horrible a thing as it is to say, you kind of get a bit of energy from that, because you're like, at least that's not us.
That's not us.
And then the other thing I can guarantee you'll see at ÖTILLÖ at some point on the course is you'll run through the woods, and there'll be one swimming paddle on the floor, and you'll be like, at least I'm not that guy.
At least I have both my paddles and my goggles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Andy, I mean, I don't know how we can thank you. I mean, you helped us tremendously when you came back on the show. When you came on the show, episode 24, you're helping us now. We're super stoked to be, you know, to have you guys supporting us through this whole effort. And yeah, just thank you so much for taking the time. This was so freaking useful.
Yes.
No, I think you guys are doing a great job, not only in what you're doing with this prep 5 months out and all the rest of it, but promoting the sport, promoting, you know, it's because it's still a niche sport. It's a small deal, and we love Swimrun at Precision Fuel and Hydration. So anything we can do to help out, and I hope we can make it. We've said before, I hope we can make it to San Francisco and come and actually swim and run with you guys this year, which looks like it might actually happen now that the flights are back on.
Don't tempt us.
That's
Don't
right.
tempt us.
Well, open invitation, that's for sure.
Cool. No, thanks, and keep in touch if there's anything else we can help with.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Again, I used 2 notepads. There was so much goodness coming out from there. And I when we were chatting with him, like, okay, shit, I got to remember this. I got to remember this. But I mean, just such a wealth of information and knowledge there from Andy there. And a few things we wanted to note as well. We chatted about a couple articles within that we'll have in the show notes. Also, there was a great webinar that Andy Blow did with Matt Dixon of Purple Patch Fitness. Now, Purple Patch sounds familiar. Coach John Stevens, senior coach Mike O. They are all Purple Patch coaches. So had a great conversation with Matt Dixon, the founder of Purple Patch Fitness, and Andy Blow. So we'll link that webinar. It's about an hour long. Another great thing. And I've just been poring over the PH site and absorbing everything I can, because nothing but just amazing, useful knowledge coming from that crew.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a huge game changer just on the hydration side, and now really focusing more on the fueling side as well. I think it's gonna be awesome. So yeah, so we hope you found this episode interesting. We're putting it out there. Happy to get any feedback. You can DM us. You can send us an email, lowtideboys@gmail.com, and let us know what you think. If you're racing and you have questions, we might even be starting like a support group, like a ÖTILLÖ World Championship support group. But yeah, that's the show. And yeah, we'll do it again when we're 4 months out with more guests as we prepare for ÖTILLÖ, the Swimrun World Championship.
See you in a month.
Or next week for a regular show.
Yeah, that too. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Sign up for our newsletter at lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z. And check out our meme page at the Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any suggestions for the show or questions for us, send us a DM or an email at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of all our swim run activities, podcast, and other stuff.
Yeah, other stuff.
Way
to keep it PG. Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Go for a run.
Then another swim.
Then another run.
And then another swim.
And then another run.
And then just keep going. Until you're done.
Or maybe can't
And then
stop.